Hey guys, Dana here from Minimalist Baker, and today we are doing something very exciting. We are making 2-ingredient coconut yogurt at home. We released this recipe on our website a couple years ago, and so many of you have tried it and loved it, but it can be a little bit tricky. So I wanted to do some troubleshooting with you guys, do a more in-depth tutorial, talk about what coconut milks work, what the best probiotics are, talk about temperature and equipment, and help you make perfect coconut yogurt at home every time. So let's get started. This recipe is inspired by my pal Laura from the blog Raw Vegan Not Gross. She originally did the badass move of making yogurt with fresh coconut meat and blended it with probiotics, and it was really awesome. But if you're like me, you don't always have access to fresh coconuts. So I tried this recipe with canned coconut milk and it totally worked. So let me show you how it's done. Step 1, it's all about the coconut milk. When it comes to making coconut yogurt, coconut milk is essential, obviously the key ingredient, but also you need to know which brands work and which ones don't, because there are a lot of different factors when it comes to coconut milk. The fat percentage, where they're sourced from, if there's any additives, and all of those things play into the final texture of your yogurt. So I have done a side-by-side comparison of all the leading brands to see which ones work and which ones don't, and I'm gonna tell you that today. So here's what you need to know. For starters, do not try and use coconut milk from a carton because it's basically water and it will not work. So we are only talking about canned coconut milks. And first we're gonna dive into my top favorite canned versions. So let's get started. My #1 all-time favorite is Savoy Coconut Cream, which is sourced from Thailand. It has really nice percentage of fat, super creamy. And from my experience, it works with yogurt every time. So this is my top pick. I also wanted to mention that some of these brands have guar gum and agar agar. This brand in particular is guar gum free. The second brand I would recommend is Aroy D, which is a coconut milk that is sourced from Thailand, and it also is guar gum free. It has a really nice percentage of fat, super creamy, light and fluffy, and it makes perfect yogurt every time. The next brand that I have recommended for a while now is from Whole Foods. It's the Whole Foods 365 organic full fat coconut milk. It does have guar gum in it, but I think that that's kind of part of the magic, if I'm honest, because it kind of keeps the mixture really nice and homogeneous, keeps it from separating. And 9 times out of 10 when I've used this brand to make yogurt, it works. So I would also recommend this one. Okay, so we've talked about the winners. Now let's talk about the not so much winners. These are the ones that you're going to want to avoid if you're trying to make nice coconut yogurt at home. One of the brands that cut it close but didn't quite make it into the winners group is by Native Forest, their classic coconut milk. It does have guar gum in it, which I think kind of helps keep the texture together, but I feel like when I buy it, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, which is why I just ultimately wouldn't recommend it because the texture is not quite what I'm looking for. Native Forest also makes a simple version, which is just coconut milk, so there's no guar gum. But I think that's the thing that actually makes their coconut milk work to begin with. So without the guar gum, the texture is just kind of lackluster and a little bit more grainy and unreliable. So I also wouldn't recommend this one. Another new to me brand that I have tried using is by Field Day. It does have guar gum in it, which I was kind of hopeful would help with the texture, but ultimately I kind of feel like when you open the can, sometimes it's super hard on the bottom and really liquidy on top. And you just have to do a lot of work to get the texture to where you want it, so I also would not recommend trying this one out. This next one, which makes me very sad because it used to work, is Trader Joe's Organic Coconut Cream. I used to be able to go to Trader Joe's and I would buy literally like 10 cans and I would open them up and it would make perfect coconut whipped cream or yogurt every time, but I don't know what happened. I think they're sourcing it from somewhere differently. It does not work. I'm telling you, do not buy this stuff. It's grainy, somehow also oily. It's just not good, so do not use it if you're trying to make yogurt. And lastly is the Trader Joe's Organic Coconut Milk, which is basically just the watered down version of the coconut cream, unfortunately. Again, I think it's a sourcing issue. I'm not really sure what's going on, but grainy texture, slightly runny, and even slightly oily, so this one is also not a great pick for coconut yogurt. Step 2, let's talk probiotics. So notice I said probiotics, not prebiotics, which is kind of confusing and I didn't understand the difference, but all I know is that if your probiotic also contains prebiotics, it can often create mold in your yogurt and it just does not work. So I highly recommend make sure you double check your bottle and make sure that it does not contain prebiotics. The next important thing to know with probiotics is that you should get the capsules, not the pills, which are like the hard pills that you would have to crush down into a powder. It doesn't work. The pills have fillers and other ingredients in them that can interact with the yogurt negatively, and they're often just not as great quality of probiotics to begin with. So always make sure that you go with the capsules, which can be opened and the powder can be emptied right into your coconut milk. Otherwise, you're gonna have potentially disastrous coconut yogurt. Okay, so let's talk brands. The #1 probiotic that I recommend is by Renew Life. It's their 50 billion. It is not confirmed whether it's vegan or not, so if you are vegan, I have other recommendations, but I have used this one almost exclusively to make yogurt with, and it makes beautiful yogurt every time. So if you can, get your hands on this one. If you're looking for a good vegan option, I have also had success with Jarrow 10 billion. It's also often found in the refrigerated aisle. It's a really high quality, nice probiotic. I will say though that the capsules tend to be a little bit smaller, so if you are using this brand, I tend to add like 1 or 2 more to the coconut milk, since the Renew Life capsules are about twice the size. If you're like me, the first time you considered investing in a good probiotic, you looked at the price tag and thought that was way too expensive, and I totally get it. However, when it comes to making things like yogurt and investing in your gut health, it is a worthwhile investment in my opinion. And for instance, this one bottle of Renew Life has lasted me close to 6 months, and I use it and I also put it in my yogurt. And so if you are hoping to make a nice quality yogurt at home, I would encourage you to make an investment in a high quality one just so you'll get the best yogurt possible. As far as probiotics go, when you're shopping at the store, you'll notice that some of them are refrigerated and some of them are not. And I don't have a super strong opinion on whether or not you should always go for the refrigerated ones. I've just had the best success with the refrigerated ones, but I have had readers also say that they've bought ones that are not refrigerated and they work just as well. So use your best judgment, and if I were you, I would go with the refrigerated ones. Step 3, let's talk equipment. First up is having a good jar. You can use plastic, but I most often recommend using glass because it's more transparent. You can see what's going on. It's also a little bit easier to sterilize and it's more sturdy. So the one that I typically go for is this one by Weck. They make these beautiful wide mouth jars so you can fit, spoons and whisks in there if you need to mix up your yogurt, as opposed to the ball jars, which are sometimes a little bit too narrow. So this is the one that I would recommend. The one note is that I would highly recommend not making your yogurt in a metal container or tin or anything like that because it can negatively interact with the probiotic and completely botch your yogurt. Next up is cheesecloth, which you can easily find in most grocery stores. It's super cheap and it's the best way to cover your yogurt while it's culturing, keeps out bugs, keeps out dust, other things, I don't know, gross stuff you don't want in your yogurt. So you can also use a clean, thin t-shirt or a towel, something to let air through basically. But you just wanna make sure that it's thin enough to let some air move through while also keeping out the gross stuff. To keep the cheesecloth or towel or shirt in place, I would recommend using a rubber band. It's the easiest, cheapest thing you can use that keeps it secure, but you could also use something like twine if you're in a pinch. The next piece of equipment that you'll need is a whisk, and this is to use on the front end when you're making your yogurt to get the consistency of your coconut milk really nice and creamy and smooth. It will probably separate while it's culturing, which we'll get to later, but this is going to be an essential tool in getting your coconut milk to the right texture on the front end. So up next, you'll need a spoon to stir in your probiotics with, which I recommend using a wooden spoon if you have it, or you can use plastic. Again, don't use a metal spoon because it can negatively interact with the probiotics and completely botch the yogurt, so put the metal spoon away. I just use this little wooden one here, which fits nicely into my jar, but any wooden spoon will do. Step 4, let's talk sterilization. So this can be an overlooked step when making yogurt, and actually I have made yogurt before without doing these steps, but if you're putting in the time and the money and the energy to make yogurt, you might as well do some sterilization, which can be easily done by washing the jar and any equipment that will touch the yogurt with hot soapy water. I also like to pour over some just boiling water and then draining it out, and then letting everything dry and come to room temperature or cooler before adding your coconut milk and probiotics, because you don't want to add probiotics to a still really hot jar because it might kill them. So sterilization is an important step that you should not skip. Step 5, are you tired of steps yet? Good, because we're making yogurt. So step one is to select your coconut milk, and we've already gone over which ones work and which ones don't. So pick your coconut milk, go ahead and give it a good shake, and then open up your can and pour your coconut milk into your sterilized jar. At this point, depending on the brand of coconut milk you used and just the fat content and everything, it may be kind of separated or chunky. So you want to take your sterilized whisk and get it down in the jar and give it a good little zhuzh and mix everything up so the fat pieces mix with the liquidy pieces and you get a nice homogeneous mixture. So next you're going to open up your precious little probiotic capsules and empty them into your coconut milk. Again, if you're using the Renew Life, I usually do 2 capsules per 1 can of coconut milk or cream. And if you're using those smaller Jarro capsules, I would say 3 capsules per 1 can of coconut milk or cream. So at this point, you don't want to use your metal whisk, even though it's tempting because it's metal. I guess if you have a plastic whisk, you could use that. But typically what I do here is just take my wooden spoon. I kind of work the probiotic around the coconut milk. You'll see often some little bits of the probiotic coming to the surface in clumps, and I just like to kind of scrape those over to the side with the back of my spoon and get them really nicely integrated so your probiotic is completely mixed through your coconut milk. So at this point, you're ready to cover your coconut milk with some cheesecloth. So just go ahead and cover it with the cheesecloth, secure it nice and tightly with a rubber band, and make sure that your cheesecloth is potentially double layered just so there aren't any large gaping holes. So now you have done so much work, it's time for your yogurt to do work for you. It's time for activation. So you've got your cheesecloth on, your rubber band secured, and now you're just gonna sit your yogurt in a warm place, hopefully somewhere like 74, 75 degrees Fahrenheit and above, and let it do its thing. You typically wanna let it activate for at least 24 hours, if not up to 48 or even more. It depends on your temperature in your home, so if you, again, can keep your home environment a little bit warmer, it encourages the culturing process along. If your home is cooler, you can either put your yogurt in the oven with the light on, do not turn your oven on. It just provides like a warm kind of safe space for it to let it do its thing. So what you can do is at the 24-hour mark, you can dip in with your wooden spoon, not metal spoon. Take a little taste and see if it's tangy enough for you. If you prefer a really tangy yogurt, just want to let it activate for a little bit longer, but my sweet spot is usually about 48 hours. Once your yogurt has gotten tangy enough for you, we are simply going to cover it with a secure lid and transfer it to the refrigerator where it will continue to thicken and harden. So if at this point it's looking just a little bit too, runny for your liking, go ahead, trust me, throw it in the fridge, it'll thicken up, and if it doesn't thicken up, we'll get to that later. Okay, so once your yogurt has been refrigerating for at least 4 to 6 hours or however long, overnight even, is usually good enough to get it to thicken up. And then your yogurt is ready to enjoy. And you can store it in the refrigerator. Mine usually lasts at least 7 days, if not up to 10 days. It kind of depends on the brand you bought and how, healthy and active your probiotics were. But you'll know your yogurt is no longer good, just like any other food. If you smell it and it smells funky or sulfury, or if it has a film of mold on it or something, do not eat yogurt that's gone bad. But usually your yogurt will last just fine in the refrigerator for 7 to 10 days. Final step, troubleshooting. If your yogurt is not working and you're wondering what's going on, let's jump in and check in with your temperature. Maybe, just maybe, your temperature is not warm enough, in which case, again, try transferring it to the oven with the light on. Make sure that's a nice warm environment for it to do its thing. Otherwise, you could wrap it in like a warm little towel or blanket of sorts and give it a nice little cocoon of warmth to encourage it along. Hopefully that gets the temperature up enough to get it nice and tangy for you. Another reason your yogurt may not have turned out well, or if it's gone moldy or something, is if you didn't properly sterilize. Again, this is a step that I do not recommend skipping. Go ahead and give everything that's gonna touch your yogurt a nice wash with hot soapy water, rinse it with just boiling water, let it dry, and try again. Another reason your yogurt might not have worked is your probiotic. Was it expired? Was it high quality? Did it have those sneaky prebiotics in it? Bottom line, make sure your probiotic is nice and fresh and it does not contain prebiotics. Another reason it might not have worked is the coconut milk. Did you use one of the brands that I suggested, or at least one of the better ones that I suggested in the not so much winners category? Making sure that you're using a nice quality coconut milk with a good texture and a nice amount of fat percentage is going to ensure you have good quality yogurt, so potentially try another brand next time. Some of you have asked if it does work to, empty a can of coconut milk into a jar and then get some store-bought coconut yogurt and scoop it in and mix it in and see if it works. In my experience, it kind of works. It gets a little bit tangy, but for whatever reason, my coconut milk never tends to really thicken up, and it just doesn't get quite as tangy and quite as activated, so you can try this, but ultimately I would still recommend just sticking with a probiotic. Another issue some of you have experienced is separation, where the yogurt separates into a thicker part on top and a liquidy part on bottom, which is totally normal in some cases, but I do want to talk about ways to address that and how to get thicker yogurt in general as well. So first, if you notice that your yogurt has separated and there's just a pretty small, like maybe a ½ inch or less line of separation between the fat and the liquid, what I would recommend trying first is just go ahead and stirring it all up again and then throwing it in the fridge where it will harden up and thicken up. And hopefully the separation will completely minimize once it's refrigerated. So you can give that a try first if you have a little bit of separation. So if you notice separation and it's maybe, 2 inches or more, and so maybe you're looking at like quite a bit of liquid at the bottom, one simple solution is just go ahead and like scoop off the thickened yogurt and put it into a separate container. And then you can either discard that liquid or you could save it for something else like smoothies. Use it soon, obviously, don't let it go bad, but that's another way to completely, get around the separation issue that you might have. Lastly, the most surefire way to take care of separation is straining. This method actually helps it thicken up to quite the quality of like Greek yogurt, that nice like thick, creamy Greek yogurt. So what you wanna do is set a fine mesh strainer over a mixing bowl so there's at least like a 1-inch separation. Lay some cheesecloth into the fine mesh strainer and then pour your yogurt over the top and lightly cover it with a towel or some, wrap of some kind. And then set it in the refrigerator up to 12 to 24 hours, and you'll see that the liquid will just kind of drip down, and what you'll be left with is a nice, thick, creamy Greek style yogurt. So, if the first two methods did not work for you with separation, try this one because it works every time. Okay, lastly, maybe your yogurt, you've cultured it, it's been doing its thing for 48 hours or more, and it has a weird smell. Maybe it's sulfury, maybe it's eggy, I don't know. It's not good. Don't risk it and eat the yogurt anyways. I have personally never had this issue because I've, followed the sterilization steps and I, use the right coconut milks and I make sure that the probiotics are nice and fresh and there's no prebiotics. Again, no prebiotics. But yeah, if your yogurt for some reason just has a really off-putting smell, chuck it. It's not worth risking it. Okay, and there you have it. Delicious, creamy, 2-ingredient coconut yogurt that is super easy to make at home. You can enjoy it plain, or my preferred is to add a little bit of a fruit compote on the bottom for a little fruit on the bottom swirl situation, which is really tasty. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Bye, friends.